My friends, the world's all ablaze with the RTX 30 series, the RX 6000s, the PS5s, and the Xbox series was whatnot, and it's all out of stock. What does it even matter? Which is why I partnered up with Newegg to actually bring you a PC you can build right now. This is what I would consider one of the best $500 gaming PCs you can build right now. Brand new. Sure, it doesn't run the top of the line spec. Sure, it doesn't have the best graphics card known to man. But you know what it does have? Availability and the ability to not hurt your wallet. So big thanks to Newegg now for sponsoring this PC build. Now let me go ahead and explain the building methodology before we get into the benchmarks to show you how this $500 PC stacks up against most of the latest games. The only one I don't have here is Cyberpunk 2077 because that comes out tomorrow and I just don't have it ready. And from what I gather, this PC is not going to perform particularly well. 1080p low, maybe 30 FPS is what we're gathering. Hopefully it's better than that, but don't expect this to be able to run Cyberpunk because not much can run Cyberpunk at this point. So for the crux of the build, I decided to go with the Ryzen 3 3100. It's one of the best $100 CPUs you can get with the Zen 2 process, and those 4 cores and 8 threads are just absolutely delicious for whatever we need to do, whether it's video editing or video gaming. So once I decided on the processor, I needed to find a motherboard to accompany it, which is why I went with a lower end board. You don't get overclocking support and you don't get the bells and whistles of PCI Express 4.0, but the Gigabyte A520M S2H provides everything you need for a Ryzen 3 build. You get the ability to put the Ryzen 3 in it first and foremost. You get 2 RAM slots for 16 gigs of RAM. You can upgrade to 32 later on with 2 sticks in case you want to, or even 64. My mini PC has 64 gigs of RAM in it. And it's just a simple board for $70. You don't need a whole lot. The 3100 is not going to overload the VRMs. It's honestly good enough. Now for the storage, I am a big believer in the fact that you should not have a spinning hard drive in your PC unless you absolutely need more than 2 terabytes. It just doesn't make sense from a cost per gigabyte standpoint. You get a 256 gig SSD, add in a 2 terabyte hard drive, and you actually spend just as much as you would have on a 1 terabyte NVMe 3.0 drive. So I went with the Silicon Power 1 terabyte NVMe 3.0 drive. Sure, it doesn't have DRAM, but it does have HMB, which on NVMe helps to make up for some of the discrepancies of not having DRAM on an SSD. It's going to perform phenomenally well. You're going to get multi-gigabyte per second reads and writes on this thing, and in all of my video game testing on the system, which should have been on for this entire damn thing, and in all of my testing of the system, boot times were great. I noticed no slowdown either in transferring games over to the computer or in actually trying to load them. So the Silicon Power served me really well. Now, in order to save the most room that I possibly could for the graphics card, I decided to cheap out a little bit on the case and went with this DIY F2P case. And I know I've roasted other tech tubers for using DIY PC cases in the past, but that was different because they were in a competition. I'm not. I'm just trying to give you the best bang for buck, and DIY PC happens to offer that at $33 for a case, and it has gorgeous purple accents. Look at that. My goodness. Delicious, delicious PC case. It's honestly hard to go wrong for 30 bucks. I just wish that when the other tech tubers did their video that just they spiced it up a little. It was a competition. Right now I'm competing for the best bang for your buck. Now the next 2 parts kind of go hand in hand. That is the power supply and the graphics card. The power supplies have been in short demand, which has made it hard to find ones that are actually affordable, and GPUs the same. Because of all the new GPUs that have been coming out, it's made it difficult for older GPUs to also have stock because the companies have moved on, which is why I went with this RX 570 from ASRock. When I asked Newegg to send this over, it was running at $100 after mail-in rebate, which meant that this PC build came in under $500. At this point, it's going for $150, which does make it a harder pill to swallow in 2020 for a card that came out several years ago. But at the same time, AMD and Nvidia aren't launching lower end cards, so the RX 570 still is that like sub $150 sweet spot card. As much as I don't want it to be, because we need to get rid of Polaris, it's really what you should be buying if you need a $500 PC right now. And we just don't have any indication of when it's going to get better. This might apply until, you know, July of next year, in which case, yikes, big yikes. But with all indications of the stock issues that we're having right now, it's entirely possible that that might happen. So because we got the RX 570 at the $100 price point, I decided to go with an affordable power supply, which is this Thermaltake Smart 500 watt. It has braided sleeve cables. Yes, it has the ketchup and mustard. For $20 extra, you can pick up a cable extension kit and just get rid of those in case that's your bag. But the DIY PC case allows me to stuff in the cables under the hard drive tray and route them through the back so that it doesn't get overly cable-y. It is cable-y, but it's not too bad. And the RAM that we chose for this build actually got lost in the shipping process, so I swapped it in with my Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro, which is a little bit more expensive, but the Oloy Warhawk DDR4 3200 CL16 kit is an absolute great choice, especially at the $65 price point. It makes a lot of sense. You get the speed that you need as well as that 16 gigabytes of capacity, which is basically a must in 2020. So that's my thought process behind this whole $500 PC. The Ryzen 3 as the base and kind of trying to build up the PC around that led us to cutting some corners with the case. But honestly, this DIY PC case comes with two fans, which are purple LEDs, mind you, front and back. You get an intake and an exhaust for $33. Hello. We had to cut a little bit of corner on the SSD, not getting the best NVMe drive that you possibly could, and the RX 570 isn't the best card you can get, but the Ryzen 3 does serve as a solid foundation so that if you do want to, with an upgrade path later on down the line, upgrade to a RTX 3050. This is still going to be able to hit that mark for you because the Ryzen 3 3100 is such a good base with that Zen 2 processing. All right, with the PC build explanation out of the way, let's go ahead and get to performance because I'm sure a lot of you care about that. I did my best to limit the games that I'm testing to games that either came out in 2019 or 2020. I think the only exception to that is Witcher 3 and GTA 5, but for the most part, it's newer games, again, without Cyberpunk being included in that mix. And all of these games were tested at 1080p high to just kind of give you an idea of where you could scale from there, dropping to medium or having room to go up to ultra. So let's start with the latest game on this list, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. We ended up getting nearly a 58 FPS average, which is just absolutely good. Horizon Zero Dawn, 51 FPS. Red Dead Redemption 2 was only 42, but that's a game that's a bit more demanding. Dropping that to low to medium should get you that 60 FPS mark. Death Stranding, 66 FPS average. Fortnite, we ended up hitting 88, which is pretty good. Dropping this to medium or low should get you to the 120. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, 62 FPS average. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, 55.5. We're so close to the 60 FPS mark. Just drop things a little bit and you'll hit it. Witcher 3 actually averaged dead 60. VSync wasn't turned on, it just was at the 60 FPS mark. GTA 5, we ended up doing 70 FPS. Valorant, 216, which makes sense since it's a more esports FPS title. Crysis Remastered. This is probably the worst performing game out of the bunch, 42.1 FPS average on that, and then Borderlands 3, we ended up hitting 44.1. So for the most part, you should be able to get close to 60 FPS at 1080p with the RX 570, even with games that are coming out in 2019 and 2020. This PC is still going to serve you pretty well. Cyberpunk, the big question in the air, don't really have that answer as of right now, but it should at least play the game. If it can play on a base PS4, it can play on an RX 570. And in all of that testing, the DIY PC case actually did really well with thermals, probably thankfully due to the front intake and the rear exhaust. We never hit above 72 Celsius on the GPU and never above 52 on the CPU. So thermals were actually really good even in a cheaper case. But that is my $500 PC build guide for right now. The best PC you can kind of build new for this price point. You might be able to squeeze out a few new deals here and there, especially during this holiday season. If you can get like a 1650 Super or 1660 Super somewhere in this price budget, absolutely go for it. This isn't a hard and fast recommendation, but just kind of the best I could do with the $500 PC build budget that Newegg Now allocated to me. And I just want to give a big thanks to Newegg Now for sponsoring this video. All of the parts that we got you can find on their website, and you should definitely use Newegg when building your next PC. It's actually where I got all of the parts for the first PC that we did on this channel. Purchased them all from Newegg because I knew back in 2015 that was the place to get your PC parts, and I'm very thankful to be working with them now that our channel is here in 2020. So big thanks again to Newegg Now for sponsoring it. Check the links in the video description description for all of the parts mentioned in today's video. And with that being said, I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you for watching our $500 build guide. Let me know what you would change down below in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video, friends. Cheers.